Hello and welcome to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. My name is Nathalie Himmelrich. How to Deal with Grief and Trauma is completely self-funded, produced and edited by me, Nathalie Himmelrich. Consider making a small donation to support the podcast. Go to bit.ly/support, capital G, capital T, and podcast. I repeat, bit.ly/supportgt podcast. Thank you so much. And for more information, please visit Nathalie's website, join the podcast Instagram page, and subscribe to the newsletter to receive updates on future episodes. This week's guest, Emma, lost her husband Barry through suicide. In the first part of the episode, Emma candidly shares how she dealt with his death while living in a foreign country without any family around. She describes how people reacted to the suicide and stopped being in contact with her. 10 years after Barry's death, attending their best friend's funeral, she reconnected with so many people and one after the other apologized for not knowing what to say or do. This meeting changed Emma's life and led to the creation of Help Text, which supports grievers after all kinds of losses. I'm not easily recommending grief resources, but I will absolutely put my hand up for this amazing resource and support, and I have provided my expertise and content of my books to be used in Help Text. So I am a proud supporter, and for this week's podcast gift, go and check out Help Text here, helptext.com/grief-and-trauma, and get a discount if you'd like to sign up. About this week's guest, Emma Payne is a seasoned technology entrepreneur and MIT graduate who started building online communities before Netscape was born. She's the founder and CEO of Help Text, a games-changing SaaS, short for Software as a Service, business that delivers ongoing, accessible expert grief and mental health support globally via text messages. Every single day, Emma combines her personal grief experience and her more than 25 years of tech space to provide people with thoughtful, practical support that really works, straight to their phones. I'm absolutely certain that you will enjoy today's episode as much as I did. So welcome, Emma. It's so nice to have you here on the podcast. How are you today?
I'm really well. Thanks, Nathalie. Thanks for making space for me today.
I'm looking forward to talk to Emma because she has some really interesting support suggestions for those of you listening here. So I want you to make sure that you listen to the end and also check out the show notes for links to what we're going to talk about. So why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about how loss, grief, and trauma has touched your life?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. My friend died about 5 years ago, and it was the first time that I'd been with somebody at the end of their life, and he had asked me if I would deliver the eulogy at his funeral, and I said, yes, of course, I would be honored. But after he died, I was definitely very scared to do it and daunted to go and speak at the funeral. I had to fly across the country and stand in front of hundreds of people, because this friend was the best friend and second cousin of my husband, who had died 10 years prior by suicide. So really what I had agreed to do was to travel and speak in front of a lot of people who I hadn't heard from when my husband died, people that I hadn't heard from at all sometimes. So it was a scary thing to do. But now I really think that it was a gift from my friend because it changed everything for me in my grief experience. So I did deliver the eulogy and then went to the funeral and the pub night afterwards because Barry and I had been together since I was 19 and I was 31 when he died. So all of our college friends, people that were a big part of our lives. And when I arrived at the funeral, I sat down in my pew and they had me speaking. Because I was speaking, I was near the front, and the woman to my right said, "Oh, hi, how are you? How did you know the family?" I said, "My name's Emma." And she starts crying. "Oh my goodness, are you Barry's widow?" And I said, yes, I am. And she said, I'm his aunt. And I said, I know, we've met. And she's like, and this is his cousin. I said, yes, I know, we've met. And then basically for the whole weekend, everyone was saying the same thing. Like, I'm so sorry, Emma, that I didn't reach out. We were worried about you, but we didn't know what to say. It's the first time I knew anybody who had died, and I just was too scared.
They didn't recognize you when you were there sitting next to them?
They just, lots of years had passed. And they didn't, I think they were embarrassed, or sometimes they were ashamed, or just everyone was apologizing. Mm-hmm. And so on my plane ride home, I just thought, well, this is a gift from my friend, because I thought people just didn't care, or they just weren't reaching out to me. And because Barry died by suicide, I was very good at inventing reasons why. Maybe they're mad at me. Maybe they think it's my fault, So I spent 10 years not hearing from people. And then all of a sudden I spend this weekend with everybody saying, we loved you and we care about you, and we just didn't know what to say. So on my plane ride home, I just thought, that is crazy. I spent 10 years not hearing from people, but 100 people spent 10 years feeling ashamed or guilty. So maybe there's something I can build that would help with this problem. And I had already spent 20 years building web and mobile applications for lots of other things, like getting young people registered to vote and caregiver support. So I thought, we must be able to use text and our phones to give people suggestions for how to help when someone dies. So I had a long flight back to Seattle, and I mapped out this idea for sending expert grief support by text message. And I thought that when we landed and I got on Wi-Fi, I would see, oh, this already exists. I thought there would be lots of mobile applications for grief and loss. And then we landed and I got on Wi-Fi and there was nothing. Now there are some more things, but then there was nothing. So that's what led me to create help texts.
How many years ago was that now?
That funeral was December of 2015. Mm-hmm. So I started working on the idea in 2016 and 17 and trying to meet people that work in bereavement. I still had my regular job. And then I started the company in 2018 and quit my regular job February 2019, which is when we started sending texts.
Wow. So
everyone thought I was crazy. Quit my job, sell my house, just try to do grief support. But that's the best decision I ever made.
Wow. In such a short time, you sort of rolled through the last
20 years.
20 years. I want to circle back and then circle forward again, if that's okay with you. Mm-hmm. Because we sort of spoke just before we started recording about a couple of things and also how we met. I mean, first of all, I knew about help text from another podcast guest, and then we met through common groups. And now, but I want to go back to how you dealt with your loss, because that obviously was leading into then going back to the family members of Barry, and then what created or what helped create help text. But for people who are experiencing trauma and loss in the sense of a suicide or partner loss, they might be interested. How did you deal with that at the time?
Yeah, it was, so I was 31 when Barry died and 19 when I met him. Mm-hmm. So he was all I knew in terms of, serious romantic relationship. And it was when I found out that he had died, I remember that I was standing against a wall. We were living in London at the time. Mm-hmm. And the wall in the hallway was bright orange paint. And I have this memory of falling down this bright orange wall. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like such a cliche, but it is exactly what I felt, where as if someone just took a piece of paper and just like ripped it straight down the middle. And I knew as I was falling that one part of my life and one part of my existence it ended, and another one was started. Like, it just was it was extremely traumatic, very, very scary. And from the beginning, I tried to fight my way to, everyone says, like, get back to normal. And then I was very hard on myself if I didn't get back to normal. And I had like a successful career before that. And like, I was crying in the bathroom at work. I was very hard on myself. And I think that I spent half of the time being sad that Barry was dead, and half the time beating myself up for not being, faster or better at grieving. And that was a huge mistake. And that's what I really have learned over the years, that I should have just given myself the grace and space to feel what I was feeling, and that was all normal and part of the journey, instead of battling it the whole time. I just was it was just my first experience of
significant
loss, and it was the suicides. I was angry. I had a whole year where I would actually describe myself to other people as a murderer for no reason. Like, when I look back at it now, but that somehow it was my fault. Or then another whole year where I was just so angry with him. And he had FedExed me a journal that had inside it 10 different suicide notes that I needed. I had to take them out and give one to his parents and one to his friend. And like, I spent the whole time just doing what he told me, which at the time I just did it like a robot. But then afterwards I was angry, so then I struggled with that because I didn't want to admit that I was angry with him. So I didn't want to say that. So I don't know. I think I was very, it was just my first loss, and I just didn't know what to do. And
exactly.
I just didn't know what to do.
I mean, you said you were 31. You told me you were 31. You said you were in London. So I assume that this wasn't your home. So you were also somewhat not surrounded by family support. Is that correct? And you didn't know any better. It's not something that we know how to do, right? When we get into it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why the experience at my friend's funeral then 10 years later was so important and changed everything for me, because it was about applying some grace and patience to the experience and understanding that it's hard for everybody, that we just don't have the grief literacy that we need to have. People did not know what to say to me. Exactly. I had this one friend, it was more than a year after Barry died, I got a card in the mail, a physical card in the mail. And in the mail, this friend Wendy said, "I'm so sorry it's taken me this long to reach out. I was scared and I didn't know what to say, but I have been thinking about you, and here's my, email address." And that day, the day I got the card, I sent her an email and I said, "Oh, that's okay. I understand. I know it's been really difficult for everyone, but now I'm glad to be back in touch." Never heard from her again. So people just have like such a jarring experience, and that's why it can feel very, very, very lonely. Yeah, as you know.
So she reached out, but then it was still difficult.
But it's still, yeah. So that's why the experience at my friend's funeral was so powerful, because then I have everybody, now 10 years has passed, and everyone is saying, this is really, really hard. This is why it was hard. This is why I didn't reach out. And I just thought, we can solve this. The world is full of wisdom for how to support people after a loss, after a traumatic death. We have so many experts who have written so many books and have so much good advice. So how do we get it to people? How do we just get it to people so that you don't spend 10 years not hearing from the people that you care about?
So my mother died from suicide 11 and a half years ago. And at the time we were living in Australia, but we already planned to come back to live in Switzerland. So we then came back half a year later. And, similar to you, the interesting thing was for me that as long as I was living abroad and I would come back on holiday, I would meet up with friends, and it was always a big happening that I was away living abroad for 15 years, and every time I would come back, I would meet up with my friends. And then when I started living here, and it obviously was after the death of my younger daughter and after the death of my mother, I mean, I had changed. That was non-negotiable. I had changed. I was also a young mother. But interestingly, there was the number of friends that I would usually see when I came back from holiday totally decimated. There was only a few people that sort of remained. And there was one person that said to me, I don't know what to say to you, because when I talk about things, I feel it's like trivial day-to-day stuff. And I said, well, of course, that's life. And and that's to be expected. That is okay. Yeah. But I guess there is this strangeness of the me after loss, and I'm different. I mean, I speak to clients, I normalize their new normal, not feeling normal, but actually it is a new person. And especially when parents grieve the loss of their child, they have to remake their person that they married, which is no longer the same and is expressing themselves in completely different ways, especially in raw and early grief. But yes, it is interesting, that jarring. I can completely relate to. And also the expression of anger. I was angry at my mother for so long. And I can relate to that.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't know that about your mom. It's very difficult. Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, so one of my absolute favorite things about my work right now is when we hear from supporters. So we send texts to people who are grieving all kinds of losses, from suicides to stillbirths, and expert advice for them and tips and resources. But we also send tips and reminders to the friends and family who don't know what to say.
Perfect.
And sometimes we hear from those people, and I'll give you some examples, because it just, people think, oh my gosh, Emma, your work must be so depressing. And I say, no, it's the opposite. It is the most joyful and beautiful work, because when people feel held and seen, and when we know what to say to each other, it's a completely different experience. So we had launched back in 2019, and we had a young mom sign up because her son was stillborn. And she said that her husband wouldn't even mention the baby and was just essentially drinking too much. And her best friend had flown across the country to help with the baby. But then the baby was stillborn, and she just got back on the plane and said, I don't know how to be with you when you're like this, and left. So the new mom was trying to be back at work. She worked at the bank, and she has an empty nursery, and her husband won't talk about it, and her friend's gone. So painful, not just the loss of the baby, but the whole feeling of being alone with the pain.
Secondary losses.
So she started getting our text messages for stillbirth, and she added in her husband and the best friend as her supporters. So they now start getting texts with suggestions for how they can support her. And on the second day, we got a note from the friend, the one who got on the plane and said, I don't know how to be with you when you're like this. The second day, she texts us and she says, thank you so much for understanding. This is hard for me too. I don't know what to do. So she's struggling, she's in pain, and then now she feels guilty and embarrassed because she doesn't know what to do. Then we start texting her for that whole year, and then that relationship is stronger than ever, right? And she's there when that mom conceives again and has a healthy pregnancy. But otherwise, I think that relationship would never have healed, because this person who you were relying on to help with the baby just vanishes and says they can't be with you like that, and that's it.
Because they don't have the resources either.
So I just don't have the resources myself. So we had another subscriber she was a young woman, and her dad died. She was in her 20s. And so she was receiving texts about losing a parent to cancer and losing her dad. And she added in her boyfriend as a supporter. Now he's her husband. But she says, I don't know what you texted him. I never asked to see what he got. But I know that everything changed. And he made a reservation at my dad's favorite restaurant on the anniversary of my dad's death. He started sharing his favorite stories about my dad. And so then we asked, is it okay if we reach out to him? Can we ask him for his perspective? And he said, yeah, I was just so relieved. I love her. She's crying all the time. I don't know how to make it better. I can't cheer her up. So I'm just very relieved and grateful that you tell me specifically things to do. And then I start doing them, and then it works. And everybody... It's actually a very uplifting experience, to do that coaching and bridge building for the friends and family who do want to help. They just don't know how.
And so for those of you listening who have been listening to multiple episodes, you probably know that one of my latest books is called Bridging the Grief Gap. And when we spoke pre-recording, me and Emma, we found out this is exactly what this book is about. It's about helping to build a bridge between those who support and those who bereave, because they don't speak the other language. The bereaved person does no longer speak non-bereaved, and the supporter does not speak bereaved. And so to help each other, it's like learning another language. And even though the bereaved person was once non-bereaved, they do no longer speak that language. And so it was really beautiful to have this. And so that this is why I love the idea of help text, because it's so suitable. And I can think of many of my clients who would so benefit to say, well, I don't know what to do because my whoever partner who's lost someone in their life, I don't know how to deal with them. So I think it's fantastic not just to support the bereaved, which many grief supporters do, but also to understand and support the support person. So the same in my work. I had once, and this is what led to this last book. I had this sister who reached out to me for her sister, saying that she lost the baby in pregnancy and she didn't know how to help her. And then she became my client who lost the baby. And I was translating between them because there was, similar to what your story was, there was this huge willingness to support one another, but they didn't know how. So I'm really fascinated by the technology of today. What makes help text so great, because it's just really accessible.
Yeah, it's very accessible and very low barrier to entry. You don't need a computer. You don't need a Zoom video connection. You don't actually even need the internet. It's text. It's not an app. There's nothing to download or install. So it's incredibly, the accessibility and piece is a big value for text for sure. And 80% of the world can receive a text message. We're delivering support in 20 languages.
20 languages.
Yeah. Wow. And globally. So if the person who wants to support you is in Australia, they can get text with suggestions for how to support you from a distance. So I think that's a big part of it.
That's fantastic.
It's the only answer, right? We have the number of people, trained grief counselors, that are available to provide one-on-one support, even if everyone could afford it, which they can't, even if everyone lived in a place where they could access it, which they don't. There simply are not enough people. We have increasing mortality rates, an average of 9 people grieving every death. There's an enormous need for grief support and less people available to deliver that support. So we have to learn to support each other. Yeah. The grief literacy and learning to speak the language of the bereaved is the only way that we're all going to feel held in our grief. And most people prefer to get help from their sister, their husband, their boyfriend, their best friend, than to pay somebody a separate, we want it from the people closest to us. So I think it's what has to happen in order for everyone to feel that they can they get the support that they need. And then if you need more than that, then there's professional support and wonderful books and other tools. But that idea of training people to speak bereaved, I think, is really important.
Oh, it's exactly what I'm envisaging as well. I mean, in my ideal world, people would find someone to talk to about grief, about loss, about the death of their sister, brother, mother, whoever, and use language that is not, how would I say it? Like, it is not based on shock or like, I don't know what to say. Like in my daughter's case, when she introduces herself to a new group, and it's like that she's 12 now, but the question is, well, how does she introduce herself? She's an individual twin, but her sister is still ever present. But when she introduces her, I mean, kids are a bit different, but some people find that disconcerting. They don't know what to say. Some people have even said she shouldn't lead with that thing, but I'm saying, well, why not? Why can't we live in a society, in a place where people say, oh, that's really sad. How is it for you now? And then also move on to other things, because a 12-year-old doesn't need to talk about this for hours, but to have the acknowledgement, to get recognized.
Yeah, instead of feeling that you have to hide it or not talk about it.
Exactly. The last, we spoke about that as well, the last couple of weeks, I interviewed 2 people focusing on pet loss. And that's another area of loss where people are so minimized. It's like, well, it's only a cat or a dog for people who don't understand. But it's so important to have that loss equally acknowledged like any other loss, because the person or the being or whatever has been lost, it depends on the relationship that these people have had. And that it's the relationship, the importance of the relationship, that is no longer able to be in the same way, because that love has no home anymore. So you mentioned as well that you have pet loss. You want to talk about the pet loss?
I love
support?
the support that we're providing for, we have help text for pet loss, and we've worked with lots of like world-leading palliative veterinarians. And, for example, there's a text message for someone after their dog has died that talks about the routine of going for a walk and how this is a thing that you can do differently and a time to think about your dog. And so we have support for pet loss now, which I think is really lovely, and support for anticipatory grief. So when someone has a terminal diagnosis and they're dying, you can also now get our texts to help you through that end of life journey, and then transition to grief after they die. And also now a new service for pregnancy loss. It's really nice for people to receive something that feels tailored to them. It has your name in it, the name of the person who died, whether it's your daughter or your dog, that your person is being named, and the birthdays and death anniversaries are being remembered, and holidays that are important to you, and things like that.
I mean, I'm just flabbergasted how this is possible, to make it so personalized in the experiences that you shared of people, of subscribers. I mean, it's actually incredible. We've published quite a lot of research now. We were the first in the world to publish research in grief-informed texting. Our acceptability rates are so uncanny that people can't believe it. And people constantly say, this came at exactly the right time. When we're coding all of our research responses, that's a very common one. This came at exactly the right time. This is exactly what I needed to hear today. I think because when I was grieving, I was ripped open. I was very open to hearing things that would be helpful. So when someone does hear something helpful, they really take it in, and then they say, yes, I will try that. Thank you for this suggestion. So all of the surveys that we've run across lots of different populations, from organ donor families in New York to hospice families in Ohio to the general population in the UK, each time we ask people for their experience, the lowest number we've got is 95% of people say, this helps with my grief and I feel less alone. It's amazing. Even higher than that is men. So men are less likely to do the signing up. Only, I think, less than 20% of the global subscriber base are men. So they're less likely to sign up. But when they do, they love it the most. They're so grateful. This is so helpful. I think, it feels private. They can just take it to their phone.
They're not sitting in support group. Maybe they're less likely to be talking to other people about their loss, but they love text support. And the same thing with older people, 65 and over. They're about 15% of the global subscriber base, but they love it so much. So it's amazing. And it's, simple. At the beginning, everyone was saying, aren't you going to make it into an app? I'd already spent 20 years doing web and mobile development, and I just thought, I don't think we need to. Like, what is this? When you're grieving, when I was grieving, I couldn't read more than 2 sentences.
Yeah.
I literally could not read a book for more than a year. I couldn't. We talk to subscribers. They say, they go to the web to just search. Okay, my mom died, and it's just overwhelming, and it's teardrop graphics, and they don't know where to start. It takes about 4 minutes to sign up for text. You get your first text instantly, and it says, "Hi, Nathalie. We're sad to hear that your mom has died. We're going to send you messages about this, including some messages that speak to the trauma of a suicide death." Like, it feels for you because it's personalized for you. And then it just comes to your phone. You don't have to do anything all year long. So it's just very, very simple. If you want to pause because you're going on vacation, just text back stop and we'll stop. And then when you're ready to start, just text start. Very, very, very simple for the user. Not so simple on the back end. It took a long time to build it.
Yeah. So that part, that's why I say I'm flabbergasted. I'm thinking how much of that is like thought, when to send what and why and to whom.
Yeah, there's a lot of very careful thinking. It takes hours for us to even do one text. We draft it. It goes through a thanatology lens. We work with different experts. Then we go through the tagging. It swaps out for languages and pronouns and cause of death and all these different things. Also time since the death, and also time since the person signed up. When I first created help text, I was very naive and I thought that people would sign up after someone died. Well, no. Sometimes they sign up 3 years later after someone died, or 10 years later, sometimes 20 years later after someone died. So it's all time-based. At the beginning, we have a lot of texts that are for acute grief, even just simple things like breathing and bringing you through those acute weeks and months. But then we have lots of messages that are for 3+ years after the death, where we're getting into meaning making and different ways that you can carry your loss with you and talk about it over time, like the story you just shared with your daughter. Sometimes you're weaving in how you're going to have this truth about yourself be part of you forever. So we work with people like Hope Edelman on her long ago losses text. It's just so amazing to be able to take Hope's wisdom about grieving a long ago loss or being a motherless daughter and text that out to people who have lost their mom. So is that just taking these gems from people and putting them right to people's phones? It's amazing. I'm very proud of it, for sure.
Yeah. And so, as you know, Emma, the reason why I wanted you to share that here on the podcast is as well because I'm very careful and very choosy as to what I support and what I endorse, what I want people that I want to support. And not because I feel grievers are quite sensitive and quite choosy as to what they want to put. And, understandably, their bullshit detector is up and they feel like, well, why do you want to get money from me and make money from my pain? And this is not what we're here for. All of us that are in the group that we are, they are here in this grief support world because we have experienced loss and trauma and because something in us has propelled us to make something of it, to bring hope, to bring meaning to this. And we do this because our heart is in it. And yes, we also pay our bills, but this is our heart that is in it. And this is why we love what we're doing. And this is why I'm so grateful to have you share about all this. I'm totally in it. I'm loving what you're telling and how specific it is. That is the beauty, because yes, it can be general and then it doesn't speak to you, but if it's so specific that people feel, oh my God, now I know what to do, especially enabling supporters to be the support, because I feel that each one of the different support people have their place, whether it's friends, family, whether it's social workers, or if I look at my loss of my daughter, I see all these different people that were in place, just like angels. And I didn't know, only reflecting, I can see that my grieving journey has been so resilient because early support was really there. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is important because those people must have known what to do, what to say, how to support me. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really true. You don't know who. For me, when Barry died, I was so sad that people who I thought would be there weren't there. But then I was also so lucky that people that I never imagined would be there were there. Mm. And it's the people, it's an interest. And I was so lucky. I mean, my sister came to live with me. I was so lucky. But yeah, that piece of the puzzle for who you think the support is going to come from is interesting. I think we have 57 relationships in the system just for human death, for everything from mother-daughter, twin sister, colleague, patient, client, volunteer, teacher. There's lots of different relationships. And then the support is catering to that relationship. And it does make a difference because supporting your friend, if you're a teenager, let's say, is different than supporting your child. Mm. Like what kind of support you're going to give. We had a subscriber named Olivia, whose best friend died. They'd been friends since they were 4 years old, all through elementary school. They were college roommates, and her friend died of, I think it was leukemia. And she was devastated and struggling with school and angry, and the parents didn't know how to support her, and it just seemed to be making things worse, and everyone's fighting, and so she ended up getting tech support, Olivia herself, but then she added her mom in as one of the supporters, and then we're coaching the mom. Don't tell your daughter to just get over it or go back to school, giving her coaching and wisdom and suggestions for language. And it was incredible after a year to talk with them both and hear how healing it was for the griever, but also for the griever's relationship with the mom, with the people who wanted to support her, with her own friends and family. That part is so special.
Mm. And one of the things that I hear, and I can see it now, is that text is what we use in if I translate it into trauma language, is titration. Titration is a word from physics where if you pour two liquids into each other, that would give an explosion. But if you pour them into each other drop by drop, and that's called titration, then it becomes an emulsion. And this is what this text does. You're texting them titrated coaching.
I love that.
Over a year, because otherwise it's too big. Sometimes it's too big to read a book. I mean, a book you can put away, but your texts are little drops.
I used to talk about it being, I love that analogy. That's perfect. I used to talk about it, the text being the simplest and most digestible thing, because you especially at the beginning, you can't take on these larger pieces. But I met with a researcher at Berkeley about 4 or 5 months ago, and since 2010, he's been doing research into text for depression, supporting people with depression. And he was saying, the thing also with text is that every time you get a text from someone, it gives you a serotonin response. You just feel, oh, someone is remembering me. Someone is thinking about me. Somebody is talking to me. If you see an alert on your app, you don't have that feeling. If you get an email, you don't have that feeling. So, we are definitely doing a beautiful job in sending out personalized wisdom, but also the choice of text, I think, is important because it just feels personal, right? It's on your phone. You can be in a waiting room. You can be on the bus. Oh, somebody remembered that tomorrow was Barry's birthday, and here's a suggestion for a thing I could do. So I think some of it is the titration. I think you're right. And we're determined to try and keep it really affordable and deliver for a whole year so that it's a little bit drip, 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 drip over the whole year instead of a 6-week course all at once.
Yeah.
And I think that helps as well to just keep it digestible and small amounts of wisdom over time. And we've started working with lots of organizations, because if we work with a hospice, for example, and they cover the cost, then it can be completely free for the grieving family member. So that's also really exciting, because we're trying to have it, we're keeping it low cost anyway. It's only $99 for a full year of support, which is pretty amazing. But then try to get that to zero if there's different organizations that will pay for it and then gift it to their clients and users. So that's been really exciting as well. We're pretty happy when we can make it free.
So those people who have listened until here, they probably say, well, how do I do that? They might be saying, I just want to know how to do it. I mean, the link is going to be in the show note. But basically, if they come to the website, what would they need to do?
We created a code for your listeners, so people can go to helptexts.com/grief and trauma, and they'll see a sign up button, and they'll get $10 off their sign up, and it takes about 4 minutes to fill the form in, and they get their first text right away. So helptexts.com/grief and trauma. That's it.
And they just need to put in their name, who they lost, their relationship. So then it starts, and then it's for a year. And how many texts do these people get, just to get an idea?
It's about 150. It depends how much people share. If you choose to share the wedding anniversary and your partner died, or the holidays that are important to you, if you tell us that Christmas is important, you'll get messages around Christmas. If you tell us Ramadan is important, you'll get messages around Ramadan. So the more you share, the more texts. And more at the beginning, and then sort of twice a week in the middle, but in general, something like 150 messages.
Beautiful. I love it.
Handpicked just for you, based on all the things you share. So it's pretty cool.
So I'm really honored to be partnering with HelpText. I have to say, I find it is fantastic, and I hope that my wisdom coming from my books is supporting those who have experienced loss, specifically in my case with grieving parents or twin loss, or people experiencing the loss of a parent or suicide. But so make sure to go and look up HelpText, and I wish you, Emma, and your company all the best. I think it's a fantastic thing that you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to chat with you about it. I really appreciate it. And thanks for helping us write some great texts.
So what I finish with all of my guests is the rapid fire questions, just a couple of sentences to get sort of a glimpse of how it is for you. Would it be okay to go there now?
Sure.
So grieving and trauma means?
Living. I think that's just life. And I've really come to not mind the fact that I've experienced pain. I think it makes me more even kinder and more patient and more empathetic, and just I know that grief changed me, but I'm glad that it did. It makes you value the good things so much, I think. So I think it's just living.
And healing means?
Forgiving. For me, I needed to forgive myself instead of saying, I should have known, or why didn't I take him here, or what if. But I needed to forgive him for taking his life. I needed to forgive people who I thought should have been there to help me and couldn't. They were too scared or in pain themselves. So there's a lot of forgiveness that was on my healing journey.
And what have you learned about yourself in the light of loss and trauma?
I guess how strong I am, and also not. Something like both. I think I'm in some ways a lot more of a vulnerable person than I used to be. I cry more than I used to, but at the same time, that's a strength, right? That I didn't have to have so many. That vulnerability and kindness can be its own kind of strength.
And what is one thing you wish people knew about loss and trauma?
That all those extreme emotions that seem so scary and that you're trying to push away and get through quickly, are a part of it, and it's fine to feel them, that it's not going to overtake you, that as I was saying at the beginning, I was just so hard on myself, and instead just accept that there's going to be days that you're angry and days you're so sad you can't get out from under your covers, and it's okay, to be more gentle with ourselves when we're grieving, because it's part of life. We're all going to experience it. It's painful, and it's okay to experience it instead of trying to make yourself stop experiencing it, because you actually can't. I think it's better to just feel it.
What would be one specific thing that has changed since your loss and trauma that you wouldn't want to miss?
Oh gosh, I mean, everything. I've never, ever, ever loved my work and felt as useful as I do today. And I'm really lucky. I've had a good career with lots of successful jobs and opportunities and projects. But when I think that we're texting thousands of people every single day all around the world in their language with tips for how to be more gentle and kind, it chokes me up. So my determination to make meaning from I wanted to find a way to do something useful with my loss. And that led me to create this organization, which would never have happened otherwise, ever. Yeah. And so would I just have kept on doing normal tech jobs, or who knows? But this is exponentially more important and meaningful and rewarding. And every single person that I've met who works in bereavement is so incredible. And I feel I wouldn't have known anything about this world otherwise. So I would do anything to bring Barry back to life, but I wouldn't trade the experience of grief and loss at all, because I think I'm doing exactly what I was meant to do on this earth.
Yeah. Well, and help text is definitely very meaningful from all that you have shared. It is obvious. Thank you so much for sharing your gift with the world.
Thank you, Nathalie. Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. If you'd like to be updated on future episodes, please subscribe to my newsletter on nathaliehimmelrich.com. If you need grief support, please contact me for a 30 minutes free discovery session. How to Deal with Grief and Trauma is produced and edited by me, Nathalie Himmelrich. To support this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe to or follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. And remember to keep breathing. I promise it will get easier.